Welcome to another episode of Prime Time. It is the third round of the NRL Finals and AFL Finals. It's been a banger of a couple of weeks. We just got off the plane from Auckland. We were in the finals, we're in the major semi for New Zealand.
Besides the sporting event, New Zealand's a shit place. I don't want to go back there unless I'm watching the Warriors.
Don't disparage New Zealand. We're going to just Auckland. It's only got 1.3 million people. We compared it to Sydney. There's not a lot going on. We had to go to the Cass every night. You know, there was some good restaurants. Apart from that, not a lot going on in Auckland. Apart from everyone loving the All Blacks and getting around the Wars. That was it.
Shout out to Wang Kok Chinese restaurant.
That was a great place. It was for bang for buck, in the heart of the CBD. But it is the talk of the town, the Wars progressing to the preliminary final. Apart from that, Melbourne getting it done. It was nice to see. We're watching it in the hotel room late at night because in Auckland they showed at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock start.
That takes us to the fan question. Dad, what's the fan question this week?
What's the fan question for the week?
Who has the better chance of upsetting this weekend, the Warriors or the Storm?
Who has the better chance of upsetting this week, Warriors or Melbourne?
I'm going the Storm. I think they're due for a good game. They've got the big game players, Cameron Munster, Jarome Hughes, Harry Grant, to pull off an upset. Penrith Panthers, yes, they are the best team in the comp, but they've been flying too high for their own good. They're due for a game where they're just not going to play as well. They're not going to perform to the expectations. And Melbourne Storm are the team who, over the last few years, Penrith have had their number and they're going to upset them.
I don't think so. I think Penrith are going to be too strong. I don't think Melbourne, attacking-wise, are where they used to be.
They're definitely not.
And even just watching that game last week, I know Jarome Hughes wasn't there and he's a big part of that team, but I don't see an upset there. I think the Warriors are more likely to upset because if they play the game that they played against the Knights, particularly in that first 30 minutes, where they completed every set, they scored in the first 3 sets they had the ball when they were attacking, and they just match them in the forwards. If they match them in the forward pack, the Warriors are more likely to upset Brisbane. Brisbane, it's not like they're out and out a Penrith and they're one of the best attacking teams in the comp. When they're on, they're a great side.
I think
I'm saying Brisbane are more likely to be beat on any given Sunday than Penrith are. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Well, I think the Warriors are the bigger giant killers. They've beaten Melbourne Storm a couple of times during the semis over the years.
Yes.
So they are giant killers if they're on their game. Obviously, they're travelling, and it's going to be in front of a packed...
I think you're both getting carried away with the Warriors' performance against the Knights. And a big thing you're missing out on, Penrith have to play at Accor, Brisbane get to play at Suncorp. So home ground advantage for Penrith is gone.
Suncorp's massive, of course, but if they just ride the momentum that the fans, the energy that the fans gave them last week, I'm telling you, Warriors are more likely to cause an upset. They've got the forward pack to do it if they play possession and they attack like they did last week and they don't have any errors. They're more likely to beat Brisbane.
Broncos are not losing at Suncorp. You saw what they did to the Storm in the first semi. They're not losing at Suncorp against a Warriors side that's overplayed and overachieved this year. It's unfortunate for the Warriors, the Wars fans, but your season's ending.
I don't know. I just think it's more likely. I guess we'll see. But that brings us to who was our best team of the week last week. Who was your team of the week?
I mean, the Warriors. Every other team sucked because the Knights didn't perform. The Roosters sucked, and so did the Storm. They barely scraped through a victory against a lackluster Roosters team. The Warriors were the only team that performed on the weekend, so they have to be team of the week.
I'm going the Warriors as well. They played an entertaining game of footy. You know what I mean? With Tenny Zalesniak, great option on the wing there. We were riding him the whole time, having him anytime try scorer there. But yeah, for what they did to the Knights weren't completely full strength, but the atmosphere at Mount Smart Stadium was massive, and they rode it all the way. And I think that's going to be the momentum for them to go in. And I think it's going to be a great game in Brisbane. It's a 1-12 game either way in Suncorp. But our player of the week has to be either Shawn Johnson or
Nick Meaney.
Okay.
He was the only player for the Storm that looked like he was performing all night, was safe. Every high ball that they put him under, he was a bank, never faltered at any point in the game.
Yeah. Man of the match.
Man of the match performance. And I think as well his running meters was a thing that just kept them going through the game. Especially when the Roosters were trying to get a bit of momentum, he was a player that kind of reversed that.
Just on that point, was there much difference between Nick Meaney and James Tedesco, who's a New South Wales fullback and the Kangaroos fullback? He's gone up against Tedesco in a semi-final and he really didn't do too much wrong.
The thing for me with Tedesco is he just looks slower. He doesn't look as fast and as,
He's
quick
aging.
off the mark.
He's
He's aging.
aging.
It comes with age. He's still a skillful player and a great leader. So probably his talk at the back would probably be second to none in the comp. But it's just in attack, he just looks a step slower. He doesn't look like he can break onto the outside.
It's a result of the team around him. They weren't very full strength, the Roosters. You can't say they have been all season. No Manu there, no Suoliti there. So you can't really rely on a lot of people. Sam Walker played a great game, but I'm saying Tedesco, I think it's more of a compliment to Nick Meaney to match up against Tedesco and have a man of the match performance. Good on him. Other than that, Shawn Johnson, the Warriors are a different team with him in there, and you saw how the fans reacted to him. They were praising him. I was even doing that. Like, as he was walking off the field, he did a lap around the park.
Getting clapped off the field.
They love him over there. He's going to be the
What
Dalian
is he,
medalist.
the Prince of Palmerston?
Prince of, I caught it in a couple post-match interviews. Prince of Penrose. It must be a place in New Zealand.
Okay.
Penrose. But let's move on to Jared Hargraves. Okay. Now, there might be a loophole where he's able to play in Las Vegas next year for the season opener because he has a 7-game match suspension right now.
He's already served 3 games, missed the last 2 games of the season, and then missed the last game of the season and then 2 finals games.
Which you could say impacted the Roosters' result towards the end of the season and them not making it further because he would have been an impactful player for them. But they're saying there's a loophole where he'll be able to play in the test matches, as in designate them as games. The test matches for New Zealand and then the All-Star game, which will free him up to play in Las Vegas next year for the round 1 clash. Is this stupid? I definitely think it is.
No way they'll allow that. No
They,
way
they will. They will because they
it.
want Roosters to be a full-strength team in round 1. Rugby league's on display. They will allow it. No one gives a shit about the All-Star game anymore. Anyway, I barely tuned into it anyway. It's not even an All-Star game.
How can
it's whoever puts their hand up to play. And then test matches as well, so it's outside of normal competition, and they're going to count towards it. I think you can make a case for test matches and international games to count towards suspension.
No.
But an All-Star game's pretty dumb.
If you're suspended, you can't be considered for selection. Full stop. So you don't get selected, you can't play. That's it.
I think they've had a precedent in the past.
Is it suspended in NRL competition or is it all rugby league games? That's where it's define it.
That's where it's stupid. If you've received an NRL suspension, you can't play NRL games, NRL sanctioned round games or finals games.
But does an Origin game count to that?
Well, I think that's a part of NRL. That's not a part of International Rugby League. International Rugby League is separate to NRL. It's got different rules. It's got different refs. It's got everything else. It's different.
So they shouldn't allow it.
They shouldn't allow it. JWH got suspended in an NRL game. I think overseas in the Premier League, if you receive a red card in a Premier League game, you miss out on a Premier League game, not a Champions League game or an international game. So those games don't count towards your suspension. And the fact that it's a loophole for him to be suspended, would he have got selected in the first place? I don't know. So you can't guarantee that he was going to play those games
He's
anyways.
100% getting selected in a New Zealand team. He's one of the best New Zealand front rowers, Nick.
There's a lot of players that would be selected ahead of him.
No way. He's like a moral getting picked, like Tedesco getting picked.
The Roosters are a club that's already hated by most fans. So I mean, if they were,
is this someone at the Roosters pulling the strings and saying like, is there any
Well,
loophole
the
to
thing
work
is,
around to get him to play?
Jack Wyden is missing 3 games for his biting charge. They're saying that he could have been selected for Australia and maybe the All-Star game as well.
So then he was going to reverse him putting his name in contention for representative footy.
So that's what
the
I'm
thing there,
saying.
Nicholas, is that Mal Meninga never considered him for selection until after he was suspended. So he said if he didn't get suspended, he would get considered. But he did get suspended, so he wasn't considered. So those games don't count.
Someone come out from the NRL and just define it to the public if what a suspension is actually for, whether it's for NRL games, state of origin, representative footy, and then we can move on.
Well, I think every game is counted. That's the way they've put it. But it should be changed to only NRL games.
I'd like to see him play in Vegas, but as long as it's fair, because this is going to be a precedent going forward for other players, and I'm sure it's going to count for something. But looking into transfer news, there's been whispers going around on the back end of the season for clubs that are outside of finals footy. For example, you've got, Kalomatangi, now rumoured to be off contract, and he's going to be shopping his services around to potentially the Roosters or other clubs putting their hand up. The Tigers looking to get him as well, commanding a price tag of $900,000. Now, if the Roosters land him, that's something that, the only thing that the Roosters have been missing this season is a strike second rower, and that would be massive.
What do you mean? They've got about 7 second rows in their roster.
Angus Crichton hasn't been the player he was. They got Satili Tupouniua.
Yeah, I think they need a lot more than a second rower.
In terms of their full roster.
No, they got Tupouniua, they got the Butcher brothers, they got Angus Crichton. What do they need a second rower for?
Yeah, but Angus Crichton.
I said they've got strike players across the park everywhere. Imagine they get a strike second rower. You say you got Tedesco, Manu, Suolii's still next year. You got solid halves in Luke Keary, and you get a strike second rower.
There'd be, I think, maybe 10 to 15 other players I'd like to see.
Nat Butcher's been a shining light for the Roosters, but I'm just saying, imagine they get a strike second rower. Their team's complete on paper. Plus Brandon Smith in the middle, Victor Radley. That's a very tough team to compete with, but I don't think they can get him at $900,000. But looking at other transfers, it's rumoured that the Tigers have given Alex Twal the tap on the shoulder and said, you can shop yourself around to other clubs. Is this a stupid move from the Tigers?
Yes, he's one of their, few players that have actually played well consistently across the season. I understand maybe he's not a groundbreaking front rower, like Adam Fanua Blake.
But he's one of the most consistent front rowers in the comp and a shining light at the Tigers. Not someone at the Tigers you say, hey, you can move on somewhere.
And I know this might be something that is surprising to people. He's one of the few players that actually enjoys playing for the Tigers.
Yeah, he's come out publicly before and says he wants to stay there for the rest of his career. He loves the club. And now all of a sudden, you could be seeing him move. Good potential landing spots for him. I would say Canterbury, who are signing people on one-year deals. You got Hutchison going over, Kurtman. I think they'll sign anyone that's willing just to move to another club right now. Phil Gould just giving out contracts for fun, just as test contracts. But he could land at the Bulldogs. It makes sense. I think a lot of the Lebanese community in Belmore and the Bulldogs fans would get around that signing for sure. He's a quality front rower. But I'd like to see him land at somewhere like Melbourne. Craig Bellamy would get the best out of him for sure. He'd be one of the standout front rowers in the comp.
Bellamy's known to get the best out of players. I think he'd be no difference for Alex Twell. He'd make him one of the best front rowers in the comp. So Alex Twell, go to Melbourne, become a probably New South Wales front rower. I'd love to see it.
This could be, I think
another success story that leaves the Tigers.
That's exactly what I was going to say. This could be one of those Tedesco's, Mitch Moseses that moves on and becomes one of the best front rowers in the comp. Yeah, exactly right. Well, let's move on to our end of season reviews. Each time a team has been knocked out, we move on and do the end of season report card. So the report card on the Sydney Roosters, Nick, what's your review of the Roosters?
The Sydney Roosters get a C. Pre-season expectations had them up there with the Penrith Panthers as premiership favourites.
Yep.
They signed Brandon Smith. He's going to be coming in with Victor Radley, going to be forming one of the best middle parts of the field.
And then you look at their backline, Tedesco, Suwali, you got Manu as well in there.
So with that expectation, you get a C because you had a good end to the season. You're like one of those kids you said that crams for a final exam and just shows up and just does well.
Yeah.
They never deserved to be in the top 8. They had results fall their way. They were lucky to beat the Rabbitohs towards the end of the season to make the 8. And yes, they just lost to the Melbourne Storm, but that was one of the most atrocious games of football I've seen for a finals game.
It wasn't that bad.
So as a fan for the Roosters, you can't say you had a successful season. Trent Robertson's come out and said you had a mediocre season.
Yeah.
So you can't have a higher grade than a C.
It's a C, but they did underperform this season for sure. Trent Robinson acknowledged that. They were 14th with 8 weeks to go in the comp.
I think for me, if clubs are spending $900,000, $1 million on players, marquee players, and there's no depth at a club, and I just found that the Roosters this year, they had no depth because they've got too many marquee players. I just think that, and you're talking about Matangi going there as well. You got to spread it. You can have 2 or 3 marquee players, but then you've got to have depth.
But them with all the injuries that they had, because why they get a C is because they did go to the semi-finals with the likes of Brandon Smith missing a lot of time, Victor Radley missing a lot of time as well, injuries throughout the season, Manu going down, Sam Walker also getting dropped. You got to forget that. So they were 14th with 8 weeks to go in the comp.
But they were a minute away from a prelim final.
Exactly right. And they scraped in. I think that talks to, they do have a little bit of depth to be able to scrape in, but maybe not enough. And that's what's cost Roosters over the last 2 years. Injury toll and definitely not having enough depth to take it all the way to the final.
I say C because you had a shit season, and it's C because you just scraped in and nearly made a prelim final.
Let's move on to the next team, and that is the Newcastle Knights.
The Newcastle Knights get a B. They had a terrible start to the season. They were one of the worst teams, I think, through the first 5-6 rounds, but they recovered well. Kalen Ponga, once he strapped his headgear on properly and stopped getting head knocks, he started playing some tremendous football. Could have been a Dally M contender. And I think them making the finals was a great achievement because I don't think anyone had them in their top 8.
They got their coach re-signed for another couple of years.
Adam O'Brien gets re-signed off the back of a good end to the season. Winning 11 in a row at any point in the season is a great achievement. So you get a B.
10 or 11? Was it 10 or 11?
I think 10. I think it was 10.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a fair rating. Winning 10 in a row towards the back end of the season, going on a bit of a run. Injuries to Hastings at the end probably didn't do him any favours. But yeah, Kalen Ponga putting the team on his back. And it shows a lot of people didn't have high hopes for Newcastle Knights at the start of the season. So for them to, I think they overachieved, getting this far in the competition. So that rating is fair for me.
I mean, Tyson Gamble and Jackson Hastings, William Mason's called them out for not being the best spine.
Yeah.
But they did a good enough job to do well in the finals. They had a disappointing end to the season, losing in that fashion to the Warriors. But bar that performance, they had a great season.
I got to agree with you. Let's move on to our NRL End of Season Awards. We've been doing this over the last few weeks. But seeing as though it's pretty much 4 teams left, we can come to our own conclusions on who's been the MVP, who's been the rookie of the season, who's been the flop team of the season. So let's start off with the NRL Season Awards. Who's been your MVP this year?
MVP this year is Shawn Johnson. He's turned around the Warriors. No one thought the Warriors could be a top 4 side. Losing Reece Walsh, who arguably is the MVP, they've turned around their whole club. The Wars fans have been going wild all season, and they're treating Shawn Johnson like a god, and that's because he's the MVP of the season.
He definitely has a big impact on the team, but my MVP is Reece Walsh. For what he's done at Brisbane, he's been the missing piece of the puzzle for them. The spark that he creates off the back of their forwards, he's the most elusive player in the comp, can create something from nothing anywhere on the field. He's been the best player in the NRL.
And he's playing with so much confidence
So
as well.
I think I don't think he'll win Dally M because he has missed time, but I think he's the MVP of the NRL.
Well, those are the two players who are most likely to win Dally M.
Okay.
I think Shawn Johnson will win it because of Reece Walsh's suspensions. Other than that, though, there's no other players that are in their caliber this year.
Who's your most improved this season?
Most improved for me could be any of the Dolphins players, really. But for me, it's going to be Jermaine Osaka. Coming from the Gold Coast Titans, a disappointing season at Brisbane. He's always had good enough talent, but never really burst onto the scene and really performed to what people thought his talent could.
The Wayne Bennett effect.
The Wayne Bennett effect. 24 games, 24 tries. I think he was leading try scorer and leading point scorer this season. As a player who never really scored that much, to do that this season, you're easily most improved.
Yeah, good on you, Jermaine.
One of the best finishers in the game.
I agree, and he's a goal kicker, quality goal kicker as well. I'm going to go with Phoenix Crossland at the Newcastle Knights, a bloke that stepped up when Brayley was out for the rest of the season. He's had some NRL time. He's been in the NRL for the last 2 seasons and kind of gone under the radar, but for what he did in the Newcastle spine for the last 10 games has been unbelievable. His defence has been extremely strong. He's got a great ball out of dummy half. He picks and chooses his time to run the ball. And I think with Brayley coming back into the team, he's going to be a sought-after hooker. For a guy, I think he could be a starting hooker at any club, Phoenix Crossland.
He's transitioned into that position. Like I think he was a half.
He's played multiple roles.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's his best position in the NRL. He's been solid in the middle, and I think it was a key part of the Knights going on a bit of a run there.
So if Brayley comes back, who do you put the nod to for hooker?
I think you play him off the bench. You play him off the bench, and you let him have that impact off the bench when he comes on. And then you can also have Brayley come on back towards the end of the half. But I think he's been very strong and the most improved player in the NRL for someone that's spent time in the NRL before. And he's made a name for himself this season. So he's my most improved. Who's your coach of the year?
Coach of the year for me is Kevin Walters. Selwyn Cobbo did come out at the start of the season and call him a shit coach.
I mean, there's multiple people that have called him a shit coach.
Gamble.
Tyson Gamble called him a shit coach. He regrets those comments. But he's someone that's been called a shit coach.
With all the allegations of a shit coach, the results have proven otherwise. Tied first, obviously coming second on point differential, but had a great season. Brisbane Broncos are now premiership favourites. They've got a team that have played good football. And when a team plays good football and has great defence, you put that down to coaching. So Kevin Walters, Coach of the Year.
Okay.
I think he's the only person maybe that should get that at the Dally M Awards.
I mean, who's really coaching that team? Could be Adam Reynolds. We don't know. That's what some people have said. Just because of that, I'm going to go with Webster at the Warriors. I think for what he's done with that team to turn them around, again, not a lot of high expectations on the Warriors to go this far into the season. And they're just playing a better brand of footy. Their possession's been better. The way that their shape has been better when they're in attack. Even just watching them over the weekend, when they're in good ball inside the opposition half, it looks like they know where they want to go. They're not just playing offload footy, off-the-cuff footy, even though they look good at times doing that. They're playing more structured footy and looking a lot better when Shawn Johnson's in there, and he's leading that for sure. But that's off the back of good coaching.
I agree with you, Bika. I think if you look at Webster and Serraldo were 2 coaches at Penrith, and both teams, the Bulldogs and the Warriors, had disappointing seasons last year. And to see what he's done at the Warriors is absolutely phenomenal. We know that the Warriors have had a history of, they've had a lot of coaches there. They've had a lot of history of players not performing to their potential, but he's been able to bring the best out of those players.
And Gus Gould can't take the credit for that. And, I think he gets full credit.
Tale of 2 former Penrith coaches.
Yeah, I know, jeez. Maybe there's still hope for Serraldo. We hold out hope for him. Okay, but who's your signing of the season?
Signing for me is Reece Walsh.
He's
transformed the club. I know Brisbane have had good coaching. You've said he's MVP.
Yeah.
But he has been the best signing of the season. There's no other player who I think has transformed the club by his singular signing and his play.
Yeah.
So Reece Walsh, signing of the year.
I would easily say Reece Walsh as well. If I had to pick someone else, I'm going the Hammer. Hammer side Tabuai Fido.
Great pronunciation.
For a guy that was barely getting a gig at the Cowboys, didn't know whether they wanted to play him at fullback, he was getting a spot on the wing. look what he's done at an Origin level, and look how many tries and what he's done under Wayne Bennett at the Dolphins. Even so much so earlier in the season, Todd Payton goes, you know what, we couldn't really find a spot for him, and it was almost a bit dirty to see how good he was doing at the Dolphins. The guy's a try-scoring machine. He's a freak when he touches the ball, can create something from nothing. It's kind of a similar mold to Reece Walsh as well. He's one of the fastest blokes in the comp as well. I think he's one of the signings of the season.
I think if you're the Cowboys, you hate yourself. Because how could you not find a spot for him in the team? You saw in Origin he played centre and was one of the best centres on the field.
Yeah.
So how could you not find a spot for
You
him?
almost tap Kyle Felt on the shoulder and say, look, let's give this
Seriously,
kid a run.
like, this is like the second time this has happened. I mean, Kalen Ponga was at North
Cowboys.
Queensland, at the Cowboys, and they let him go, and now they've let this superstar go as well. So, and you know,
Always pick youth, never pick the veteran.
Well, the other thing, Brandon Smith was a Cowboys junior as well. He was there playing 20s there as well. So they got a lot of good quality youngsters going through the Cowboys system. It's whether or not they can retain them or not. And yeah, I don't think they have over the last few years. Who is your flop team of the season?
I know this may be biased, people will say, because I'm a Bulldogs fan, but it's unbiased. It's the Parramatta Eels. They were grand finalists last year, and they didn't make the 8.
Yeah, but they lost some players.
It
they
doesn't
lost
matter.
a handful of players.
If you're a premiership contender, a premiership finalist, or you're playing in the grand final, you have to make the 8. You can't not make the 8. They started off the season so poorly, and they just never got in a good.
I actually feel sorry for him because the replacements that they brought in, like Hodgson, you know, he's on a walker now. He can't play any more rugby league games. I'm pretty sure he's retired. So it just didn't. You know, Penrith have been able to plug in certain players to fill in the holes of Api Coruscant and Viliami Kikau. They weren't able to do that with the players they lost.
You look at a club like the Melbourne Storm who makes grand finals the following season, they're still making the 8. You can't fall off that dramatically to not make the 8.
Parramatta, like this is, I keep saying this over and over again. They've got too many marquee players, so there's no depth at the club. So they did get a few injuries. Obviously, the
Dylan Brown.
Dylan Brown
Yeah,
had that
CCTV cost him.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, but they haven't got the depth, and this is where Ivan Cleary is a mastermind. Like he keeps finding players for like bargain basement guys.
Mastermind, or is it just Penrith
But
juniors?
also Penrith juniors. Like,
Yeah.
you know, let's just put Talon May in there. Let's go get, you know, who's the winger that we love? We just take him anytime,
Saruva.
actually. Yeah, Taruva.
Taruva.
Yeah, top player. They've got a lot of depth in
But,
Penrith.
you know, Garner's doing well there.
Yeah.
Who's that other the other guy they got from West Tigers?
Which Tyrone Peachy.
Tyrone Peachy,
yeah,
man.
yeah,
Like,
they brought
he's-
him back to the club.
Yeah, and he's playing really well. He's going to be playing
Finals
into-
football.
I'm going to go for my flop team of the season. I'm going to go South Sydney.
That's fair.
Because with the team and depth that they have, to not make the top 8, I think is the biggest flop of the year. And they should have been there. They had the points on their side. To lose to the Roosters at the back end of the year, again with Latrell having a brain explosion, not being able to be in contention for that game, was a big loss. But they shouldn't have been there in the first place. At one point in time, earlier in the season, everyone's going, they can win the comp, they can beat Penrith. And then they fell off. They flopped. And that's, I think, got to do with their spine not stepping up. Cody Walker and Lockie Ilias not delivering. You know, you had your centre who was kind of probably in contention for Origin, Campbell Graham, playing through injury, I understand, but I just think they didn't live up to the hype this season.
I agree.
Biggest fall off of a team this season. Any team that has Cody Walker, Latrell Mitchell, Damien Cook, Campbell Graham, and you somehow don't make the 8, you're a flop of a team.
As a Souths fan, like letting
Who?
the halfback go.
Adam
Adam Reynolds.
Yeah,
like, how do you feel about that? Seriously.
Yeah,
Because
it's
he's
rough.
probably a player that could
But
guide
hey,
them
we-
through the
we
team.
It's been
met-
2 years, and apparently they're extending for another 2 years. So he wanted 3 years. You could have signed him for another
Look,
3
I
years.
will say, Lockie Ilias, I don't think you can fault him. He hasn't done much wrong. You know, he does his job at Souths. We met him the other day. He's a big boy. You meet him in person. He's actually a big half. He's a tall kid, but maybe he's just lacking the experience of Adam Reynolds. I think he's going to be a player of the future at Souths. He's just young.
His
Well, it's not
kicking
that. You
game-
just
the
had that
kicking game
argument.
of Adam Reynolds is
different.
outstanding.
You just
Yeah,
had that
second to none.
argument of Kalen Ponga and Tabuai Fido getting let go. They couldn't let Lockie Ilias go. It's the same argument.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
got to keep the youth, and hopefully, 5 years down the track, it was the right decision.
It's an investment for the future. Who is your rookie of the season?
Rookie of the season, Jacob Preston. Preston Mania, the only shining light for the Bulldogs this year.
It's at the Bulldogs, though.
I'd say, yes, but he was their best player. I think he got the Bulldogs Player of the Year, got at the end of season
Yeah.
awards. And there was no other player on the team who I said, you know what, they had a great season. Reid Marnie, I thought had a great season for the Bulldogs as well, but just in terms of the level of play that you expected from a player,
Yeah.
the way he burst onto the scene this year, he scored heaps of tries.
Yeah.
And I think going forward, he's going to be a Bulldog player. He's one of the Bulldogs' best
Strong
players.
defensively. We love Preston Mania. You know, we've kind of got to know him over the year, but no one expected that from him. Like, he was a young kid coming from the Roosters system. He didn't know whether he was going to play first grade or not this season. Gets an opportunity in round 1, and he says he treats every first grade game like, you know, he'll never get the chance to play first grade again. He loves being out there. Good on him. I definitely think he's a rookie of the season. They'll lock him up at the Bulldogs. He should be a lifer there. But I'm going to go Jerome Buller as rookie of the year at the Tigers, because, you know, there's not a lot going on at the Tigers this year. It's very disappointing. Coaches, you know, getting into punch-ons. Tim Sheen's retiring. There wasn't many shining lights in terms of players, but I think he was a standout for the Tigers, and he looks like he's going to be a player of the future. They're going to lock him up. They gave him their rookie of the year as well. You know, he was almost too shy to accept it, but he looks like a great kid, and he's going to be a player of the future of the Tigers. They should lock him up. He's incredibly fast.
It almost happened by accident as well. Like, Dane Laurie was supposed to be their fullback. They got rid of him pretty early. They didn't really want him to play fullback. And Jerome Buller, who slotted in and just happened to play well. I think for the Tigers, it is their only shining light this year as well.
Yeah, he's a rookie of the season there for me. Who is the most underrated player in the comp right now?
This is an easy one, and it's not Dylan Edwards, it's Herbie Farnworth.
Okay.
A player who does not get the respect he deserves. For Brisbane Broncos, I think he's been better than Katoni Staggs. He's their best centre.
Yeah.
And you watch, he never misses tackles. He makes barnstorming runs when he runs the ball, always making easy meters. And he makes line breaks and scores tries. What more can you ask for a centre? He goes above and beyond what you expect from him. And for the Broncos, you're going to regret letting him go to the Dolphins next year.
I agree. He's underrated because he doesn't get the credit of, you know, Manu or a Katoni Staggs.
Well, when Katoni Staggs does something
Yeah.
it breaks the internet. When Farmer does something, no one hears about it.
Okay, yeah, so he's underrated. I'm going to go with Hamoli Olakawatu as my most underrated player in the NRL because, again, in a team of like the superstars at Manly, when you talk about Turbo and Cherry Evans, he kind of goes under the radar there in Manly and in the comp. I think he's one of the most damaging second rowers in the comp. You know, if I'm an opposition halfback, I don't want to line up against him. He's scary. He's a scary looking bloke, and he's a freak. He can play, he can offload. He's got good handles with the ball as well, and he's a try scoring machine as well.
Manly's trying to lock him up for life now.
They're trying to get him on that 7-year deal.
Yeah,
you know, up $7 million or something like that over 8 years.
And he's worth it. He's damaging. He's scary. I definitely don't want to tackle him. And he's underrated because he hasn't played for New South Wales, and he should have been playing for New South Wales.
Yeah,
in terms of second roles in the comp, he doesn't get the respect he deserves. And there's actually people saying that he shouldn't have played New South Wales. You're idiots.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to our segment we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. I'm enjoying it the most because we talk about the controversies in rugby league, but who's in the wrong? Dad, what are the segments of who's in the wrong this week?
Well, it's William Mason or Tyrant. Or
Tyson Gamble?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this one's interesting because we backed Willie Mason during the week. Okay, so who's in the wrong, Willie Mason or Tyson Gamble? Willie Mason came out and criticised the Newcastle spine, as he does. You know, he's a former great of the game, and people saying, oh, he's not a great of the game. Listen, he's won a Clive Churchill medal.
And he's a rugby league pundit now as well.
He's a rugby, exactly right. He's not on a network. He doesn't have to be on a network, but like I said, he's won a Clive Churchill medal. He's been around many great clubs, successful clubs. He's played New South Wales at the top level. And he's also represented the Kangaroos on multiple tours. So he's a great of the game. You can't dispute that. He's criticised the spine of the Knights. Tyson Gamble's bit back and said, listen, he's not a spine player. And, you know, we're comfortable in our team. We've been playing off the back of, you know, guys like Jackson Hastings, and he doesn't know shit because he's a prop. And he should worry about his own backyard at the Bulldogs, which is a fair bite back, okay, as a coach at the Bulldogs. But Willie Mason waited after the game of the Newcastle Warriors game to have a jab at him on Twitter and said, you know,
Go.
There's not a hole big enough that Tyson Gamble could crawl into right now. You're a shit player. That's essentially what he said. Now, some people are saying that could have been a little bit too personal, okay, and he should have probably just gone at the whole team. Maybe he shouldn't have waited till after the game. All fair criticisms. But who's in the wrong?
I'm saying Willie Mason is in the wrong for the personal attack after the game. In the lead up to that last tweet, I was saying no one's in the wrong. It's just, you know, a rugby league player and a pundit going at each other. I love seeing it. There's a bit of controversy. Tyson Gamble's backing himself, and Willie Mason just being honest. Tyson Gamble, you're not that good of a player. It's fair is fair.
I'm going to go against you, Nick. I reckon Tyson Gamble shouldn't have bit back. He's a professional football player. He should have just taken it on the chin and just went really quiet.
I think you're able to bite back. I'm not going to say... I don't like journalists coming out and bagging Willie Mason saying, oh, you know, you're just doing this for views and you're a shock jock, you know, and every second word you say is F this, F that. Listen, Journo, if there's anyone that can be critical of a team, it's a former player like Willie Mason, who's got accolades to do it, not a journo that sits behind a keyboard and tweets all day.
So you're saying neither Mason or Gamble's in the wrong? It's
I
a
say
journo.
it's fair play. They can go at each other as much as they want. You know, Willie Mason's he's allowed to have criticisms of a team's spine because he's been there, done that. Yes, and Tyson Gamble's is in the right to say, listen, bro, you're a prop, and worry about the Bulldogs because they can't get off the bottom of the ladder. It's fair to say that. Where it probably goes wrong is the personal. He went a bit too personal after Tyson.
If I was Willie Mason...
Tyson Gamble is probably, he didn't have the best game over the weekend. He's probably shaded. His team's not going any further. And then he's got Willie Mason on Twitter telling him he's a shit player. That could be a bit rough, but it's fair game.
If I'm Willie Mason, I probably would have been a bit more ambiguous and said, that shows you the Knights' spine wasn't that good. Yeah. I wouldn't have gone personally at Gamble. People would have known that you were. It's just you were opening yourself up to criticism, but fair is fair.
But that's why I like Willie, because he says it and he has the ability to say it as is because he's a former player, former great of the game that can back it up. He's not some journalist. Because if it's Paul Kent, for example, or let's not say Paul Kent because he's kind of cancelled at the moment, but if it's Buzz Rothfield saying, Tyson Gamble can't play in their spine is shit, I'll say, Buzz, put some boots on and let's see how you go. Willie Mason's able to make those criticisms.
If James Hooper said, I'd be saying, shut up, Diego.
Exactly
shut
right.
Up, you idiot.
So I think... it's allowed to be gone both ways. No one's in the wrong there. Maybe Willie Mason a little bit because it got too personal in the end, but it's play on for me. What about this one? Who's in the wrong? The referee for missing, so Ashley Klein for missing Harry Grant's knock on in plain sight, or the bunker for getting the head high tackle wrong on Harry Grant late in the game where it could have been a penalty and the 2 points. Who's more in the wrong there, the bunker or Ashley Klein for getting it wrong early?
I'm saying the bunker's more in the wrong there. The NRL came out and said both of those calls should have been called in lifetime, but you can at least say human error on the first knock on. He missed it. It wasn't an easy knock on to call. The bunker, Harry Grant laid down and said, hey, look at this. I got head high tackled and you're not calling it. No. They had a chance to look at it. They had a chance to review it and they still said no high tackle.
They're both shit
That's
calls.
Stupid.
No, they're both shit calls, but I will say what's more in the wrong is the knock on to Harry Grant. You know what? Because it was early on in the game. The Roosters get another attacking set. Who knows where the game goes from there? Yeah. It's clear. And even if he gets it wrong, why can't the bunker just come in, halt play? It's a knock on. You clearly missed it so we can avoid those issues. I know there was play on after that, but that's a more crucial call than the head high at the end. I personally don't want to see a game get settled by a penalty at the end of the game for a high tackle.
But BK, seriously, you got to be consistent. Like there's been games where the referees called a penalty, and there's other games where because the game's in the balance, the referees will let people go offside when they're trying to charge down a field goal. You know what I mean? Like,
but in live time, not many people did. But
how many times?
As soon as they went up and looked at it, the bunker definitely should have stepped in.
That's what I'm saying.
How many times during the season have the bunker stepped in and
Bro,
put someone on report? Penalty,
the bunker's gone back 3-4 plays and called high tackle.
The
fact that Harry Grant laid down and said, hey, look at that, I got high tackled, and they still had the arrogance.
If I was Harry Grant, I would have pretended I was passed out on the floor.
People already have conspiracy theories about, the Roosters getting special treatment all the time. So, it just goes to show you, like, did they want the Roosters to win that game?
You have the technology.
The worst call at the time of the game is the knock-on. It has more impact on the game.
Yes,
is that fair?
Maybe the impact.
That's why it's worse. It's early on in the game. Roosters have an attacking set.
But the knock-on's
That's why
easier.
it's a worse call.
The knock-on's easier to miss. The bunker had time to review the high tackle instead of the arrogance to say no,
what's a worse call? What's a worse call?
The high tackle, because it's easier. It's easier to say it was a high tackle. The knock-on's harder to, in live play, stop the game and say it was a knock-on.
Whether or not, who cares?
They're both wrong.
Because of that, Ashley Klein's not going to ref the grand final. He fucked up twice, to be honest.
That's true.
He's not going to ref the grand final, deservingly so. You got to get those right, Ashley. That's why you get paid as a ref. Let's go on to our NRL player head-to-head. We've been doing these each week, so make sure you check them out at Pickle Studios on TikTok, at Picklebet on Instagram, and at the JBK Show on YouTube. But this week, in the spirit of the finals, Brisbane versus the Warriors at Suncorp. Who's our head-to-head?
Head-to-head this week is Shawn Johnson versus Adam Reynolds, the halfbacks for the Warriors and the Broncos. Mm-hmm. Looking at it by the stats, Shawn Johnson, 24 games, Adam Reynolds, 21 games. Johnson has scored 8 tries, Reynolds 5 tries.
29 try assists each.
No, 29 try assists for Shawn Johnson, 19 try assists for Adam Reynolds. That's a typo from me. I apologise. Yeah. 60 average run meters for Johnson, 51 for Adam Reynolds. And this is where it gets contentious, 14 errors each as well. So they're pretty even. I would say, based on form, Shawn Johnson has been playing much better football. The 29 try assists, 10 extra try assists is a big thing.
I know Shawn Johnson's going to be Dally M, and they can give it to him now. But you know what the stats don't show you is the organisational ability and the kicking games. You mentioned the kicking game earlier. Shawn Johnson doesn't have the direction that that Adam Reynolds does, and his impact on the team is massive. They both have big impacts on the team. You saw when Adam Reynolds came back into the team after they lost to Melbourne, how much different they were the week that they played Melbourne with him and Carrigan in there. But I think Adam Reynolds, I like my halfbacks old-fashioned, the organisational Cooper Cronks, the Stacey Joneses, you know. And Shawn Johnson's a running half. He's almost a 5'8".
He's a game breaker, Shawn Johnson.
Yeah,
He's
exactly
a game
right.
breaker. Like
And he suits the Warriors.
Yeah, he
Who
suits
has
the
been
Warriors.
more consistent over time?
Absolutely.
Adam Reynolds.
Adam
So
Reynolds.
if I was starting a team next year, I'm getting Adam Reynolds.
Okay, the question for me then becomes, who would you rather on the weekend, Shawn Johnson or Adam Reynolds?
Off the form that they're in at the moment and the momentum that they're flying in, I think Shawn Johnson's going into the game a bit more confident. But again, I'm going with Adam Reynolds with the team that he has.
I agree with you. I think if I had to pick a halfback for the weekend, based on the experience, prelim, grand final experience that Adam Reynolds has, I'll go with Adam Reynolds.
Because in a game that's going to be won off the back of forwards and possession, kicking game's going to be massive, and I bet you that's what separates them over the weekend. The kicking game of both teams.
This has probably been the most consistent Shawn Johnson's been in his NRL career. So, like prior to this year, you know, he's always lacked consistency.
Who are you taking, Adam Reynolds or Shawn Johnson?
Every day of the week.
Okay. That's
Every
completely
day.
fair.
Nothing against Shawn Johnson. It's just the experience of Adam Reynolds is what makes him a better halfback.
Well, let's go to our top 5. Each week we give out our top 5. You can catch it on @the JBK Show. This one we were umming and ahhing on who could be in the top 5 here because we're going to count it as modern day rugby league. Okay, is that fair to say? But this is the top 5 greatest rugby league players of all time. Number 5?
Top 5 NRL players of all time.
Okay, yeah. Top 5 NRL players of all time. We're not looking at
ARL.
Super League
Yeah,
and
ARL.
ARL. But number 5, I'm going with Brad Fittler. If you look at the stats, 2-time premiership winner. He never won a Dally M, but he's, Dally M centre, Dally M lock of the year, Dally M 5'8" of the year. He's a versatile player. You look at he played 336 NRL games. Now, that's a lot of games. And the achievements he did at a test level for Australia and the amount of origin games he played, like we're talking 38 tests and 31 origins, he deserves to be on the Rushmore or the top 5 NRL players of all time.
Brad Fittler may be a shit origin coach, but he's a great NRL player and definitely deserving of a top 5 spot. At number 4, I'm going with his opposing Queensland origin coach, Billy Slater, the greatest fullback of all time.
Yep.
He's a Dally M player, played over 300 games, 190 NRL tries, one of the greatest try scorers of all time. And if you look as a fullback, he's transformed the whole position. Defensively, he's the best fullback of all time, no questions asked.
Yep.
And if you look as an attacking player, I think without him, Melbourne would never have those premierships. He's easily the most important player to that position of all time and easily top 5 player of all time.
He's got the amount of highlights he's got at Origin, just at the Melbourne Storm, being a part of the big 3 at the Melbourne Storm, transformed the way the fullback position is played.
And I will include 5 premierships. All those.
Yeah,
premierships
all
count.
premierships for sure. Okay, number 3, I'm going with Jonathan Thurston, 4-time Dally M medalist. Okay, one could possibly be, probably should have gone to Andrew Johns, but just to have 4 Dally M's in your NRL career, that puts you on this list. Okay, he's won 2 premierships. He's represented Queensland in that dynasty that they went on. He was one of the main reasons Queensland went on that, pretty much how many?
8 out of 10.
8. Oh, I'd say easily.
Yeah.
And for what he's done at the Cowboys as well, he's been obviously the Cowboys' best player in terms of NRL at a club level. And you look at the amount of origins that he represented as well. Like we're talking 323 NRL games, 90 tries, 37 origin caps. Massive. And that's what he's known for. That's why he's on this list.
I think going from the Bulldogs, where I think as a young fan, he was our favourite player, put on the headgear, going into the Cowboys, winning 4 Dally M medals, 2 premierships overall in his career. I think he's the best attacking player of all time. His defence is a bit suspect, which prevents him from being higher on this list. And that's why at number 2, I'm going with Andrew Johns.
Okay.
I think he's a more complete halfback than Jonathan Thurston. Didn't have, obviously, the accolades of games played and tries scored.
2
that
premierships
Jonathan
as well.
Thurston. But Andrew Johns, still 2 premierships, a 3-time Dally M medalist, New South Wales Origin best player of all time, I would say. And I think, if that 2005 Dally M didn't go to Jonathan Thurston, it should have been going to Andrew Johns.
Yeah.
And usually, you talk to old heads of the game, they say Andrew Johns is the greatest player of all time. At number 2, it might be a bit contentious, but for us, he's the second best player of all time.
249 games, 23 origins, 23 test matches. The guy is the model for halfbacks.
There's a bit of controversy around Andrew Johns throughout his career. I mean, the fact that he only played 249 games
Yeah.
is alarming. He should have played more,
More games,
but
yeah.
in those 249 games, as an all-round player, defensive, offensive.
And the
he's
impact,
best.
we had that time off and then came back into the New South Wales team. You saw the impact he has as a halfback, the way he played the game, his kicking game. It shaped how halfbacks are in the NRL, in the modern game. That's why he's number 2. This might be a bit controversial, but number 1, not having Andrew Johns number 1 is might be controversial to some. But that's why number 1, we're going with Cameron Smith.
5-time premiership winner, 2-time Dalian winner, 430 NRL games.
Shit.
He's the leading point scorer of all time because you know what? He was a goal kicker as well.
42 Origin appearances as well for Queensland. One of the main reasons, again, why they went on that dynasty as well.
There's no other player all time who you can say was consistent, and at his position, there was someone better than him at that time.
And you say if he didn't one day, he also won 2 Dalians as well. And the amount of premierships he won at Melbourne, he's a one-club player. You know, I think out of the 3, just on the amount of games that he played between Cronk and Slater and himself, I think he's the greatest rugby league player of all time. And I think that's one of the...
He's probably one of the smartest rugby league players. I mean, him and probably Cooper Cronk. I mean, people give Craig Bellamy a lot of credit for his coaching prowess, but I mean, look at the players that he had. They're all, I mean, they all could be coaches. I mean, maybe you know, like, I mean, Billy Slater is a coach at the moment.
They're all halves coaches.
Yeah.
Cameron
But
Smith could definitely be a
Cronk.
coach.
I mean, you've got 3 captains on the field, like marshalling the troops. As a coach, that's what you want.
I also think why it's more impressive for Cameron Smith and why he's number 1, to play 400 plus games in the middle in modern rugby league, and the amount of tackles he's making in the middle. Is there any other player that has done that?
The longevity, and then also you add...
Probably could have gone another season as well.
What didn't he achieve? He's a premiership winner, Origin winner, World Cup winner. He's the captain of all those 3 sides, winning those competitions as well. As a player, he's the most complete player in terms of accolades and in terms of ability.
And let's talk about it as well. No controversy off the field as well. The guy was, you know, it was
Clean as a whistle.
sheet, extremely clean. He is the model rugby league player, and he will go down as the greatest rugby league player of all time.
And we will just confirm those premierships that were taken away, they
Yep.
do count. For us, they count. He does get those 2 extra premierships, which makes him a 5-time premiership winner.
Well, that's our top 5 for the week. Let's have a preview of the AFL Finals. I think you got a couple of tips wrong. I mean, I didn't see GWS winning either.
I didn't see GWS winning, but that takes us to the AFL preliminary finals. Brisbane Lions versus Carlton. It's going to be a tough game. Carlton are riding a win streak. They are the underdogs. They definitely should have won last week. Dad, you were watching the Melbourne Demons. They kicked 17 behinds. So this week, I wouldn't take Carlton. I'd take the Brisbane Lions. As much as I'd like to see a Collingwood-Carlton grand final.
It's meant to be.
It's meant to be, but it won't happen. And that takes us to the Collingwood game. Collingwood versus GWS, a rematch of the 2018 preliminary final. A rematch of the 2019 preliminary final. Collingwood wants revenge. I've been thinking about this game for at least 5 to 6 years. I had money on that game. I think after Collingwood lost that game, it was probably one of the darkest days of my life.
Do you think Collingwood preferred GWS winning this game?
What do you mean? Yeah, of course. I think Collingwood's GWS is an easier team to beat than Port Adelaide would have been. But at the MCG, it didn't matter who they were playing. Collingwood are winning this game. Okay. Nick Dacos should be back this week. So that just means it's easy.
I think they ease him back in. I don't think he's going to see the amount of minutes that he usually gets.
Coming
they
off
ease
a
him
knee
back
fracture,
in, and then he gets right for a grand final.
But with that in mind, Collingwood aren't losing this game. It doesn't matter who we're versus next week either because it's the flag prize this year. Okay. It's our year. Take Dacos 30 plus and Collingwood to win. Either Dacos. I think Josh Dacos had a disappointing game.
I go Nathan Cleary, Clive Churchill medalist, and Nick Dacos, Norm Smith.
Great bet.
Good bet.
I reckon we
put that.
At the end of the show, we're putting that bet on.
Okay, I don't mind that. Okay, let's preview the NRL Finals. There's only 2 games this week. We're at the final 4 teams. So we're going to go through which team should get the W, and we're going to go through our best bet for the game, our best pick for the game. So let's start with Panthers versus Storm at Accor Stadium. For me, I think this is an easy one. I think Penrith are going to be too experienced. Melbourne have been disappointing this year. They haven't strung good attacking games together. They haven't looked like they're going to be good competition. Can they beat the Panthers? Yes. The Panthers have to be off. Luai coming back into the team is going to be massive for them as well. I think Penrith are going to be too good across the park. Go forward. They'll play possession game. I'm going to take Nathan Cleary anytime try scorer.
Well, there's a bit of a cloud over Nathan Cleary.
He had a bit of a finger issue during the week, but I think he's going to be named, and they said it's not a worry.
It's a false alarm.
I'm going to take Nathan Cleary anytime try scorer and Penrith 13 plus.
See, I disagree with you there. I think it's a Panthers win, but 1-12. I just don't think in a finals game Melbourne won't show up and get blown out. I don't think Melbourne they're not the team that they used to be, and they're not premiership winners, but they're going to show up in a prelim game.
Obviously, Jerome Hughes is going to be a big addition for them. Without Jerome Hughes, Melbourne look lost. They don't know how to score tries. You saw they could barely score against the Roosters with multiple opportunities, and they barely even went to Will Warbrick until the very end of the game as a last tackle option. They need to use that way more. But I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done to a Penrith team that's firing, and they've had the week off. They're fresh. They're ready to go.
For me, like, it depends how the game starts. If Melbourne can score early, Panthers have always shown
Slow
me
starters.
if Penrith get behind, they can panic a little bit. That's just it. I mean, if Melbourne do score early, that could have an effect on the game.
If I'm Craig Bellamy, I'm watching Parramatta Eagles highlights of when they versed the Panthers. You got to find a way to get under their skin. You got to find a way to force them to make errors. They are a beatable team. They're not like they're unbeatable. They're not the same Panthers that they were last year as well. They've got talent that wasn't there last year. Api Coruscant's not going to be a player that can drive them around the park.
Melbourne can beat them. I think Penrith are going to be too strong. Let's go to the Suncorp game. The Brisbane Broncos versus the Warriors. Who gets it done?
Broncos get it done, and this is a 13-plus game. The Warriors, the Wars fans, I'm sorry, the season's coming to an end, and it's coming to an end in a disappointing fashion. Broncos have too much talent. This is a team where if you match them up against the Warriors, they can't meet that talent. There's too much of a talent discrepancy here. Selwyn Cobbo, Katoni Staggs, Herbie Farnworth.
Even their bench, I would say their bench is a bit stronger as well.
Bro, Pat Carrigan, Payne Haas, and then you got Reece Walsh at fullback, who's going to take over the game. The thing that surprised me last week was the Warriors fans' hate and disdain for Reece Walsh.
Yeah, as you would. The guy's a marquee player. He's the form player of the comp, and he was supposed to be contracted to you last year. Of course they're going to hate him.
So with that in mind, I think Reece Walsh is due for a big game against his former club. And I don't think so. If I'm going to take a bet here,
every time there has been pressure on Reece Walsh, he showed up. In Origin, when he was doing that to the New South Wales fans, he showed up the next game. Every time he's gone at it with an opposing fullback, he's always gotten on top. So if Warriors fans are coming out against him, I think he's going to show up anyway.
But if I was taking a best bet, Reece Walsh, anytime try scorer, Brisbane 13+. I really think I'm going to take that because I think it's going to hit.
For me, I think it's going to be a 1-12 game. I don't think it's going to be 13+. The Warriors are going to show up. They're going to play how they played against the Newcastle Knights, particularly in that first 30 minutes where they didn't make any errors as they usually do. They completed every set. But I just think Brisbane are going to be too good. They're attacking-wise, they're a better team. Adam Reynolds is going to be the difference maker in his kicking game. So I'm going to go Broncos 1-12. That's
I think the Warriors played their grand final like Newcastle the week before in front of their home crowd. I think what you said, Nick, Brisbane Broncos 13+.
Yeah, okay.
A big issue from the game is the start time of the game. So the game will be played at 7:50 on Saturday night.
Yeah.
For the Warriors fans though, in New Zealand, that's about a 10 p.m. game.
We were in Auckland, right? There's nothing to do there. You have to go to the casino and lose your money. Otherwise, where are you going to go to a restaurant? Apart from that, there's not much to do in Auckland City. So I actually feel sorry for him. It should be a lot earlier. People are complaining in New Zealand all the kids are going to be asleep by 10 o'clock. They're not going to be able to see Shawn Johnson and Chance play. So I feel for the New Zealand fans a little bit, but the NRL probably should have moved it a bit earlier to 6 p.m.
But I mean, this is a complaint I had the week before. Like, they played the game at 4 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, but 4 p.m. at a Saturday for people in Australia is a lot more digestible than a 10 o'clock game in New Zealand.
I don't know why. If you're thinking ahead, surely you could maybe adjust it an hour, 2 hours. A 6 p.m. game in Brisbane isn't going to deter fans from going to the game. It's a Saturday night. It's actually probably more beneficial because it's a bit earlier. It gets people more of a chance to do something after. For the New Zealand fans, you're right. There's a whole bunch of kids that aren't going to be able to watch their team. Even if you're an adult, 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, it's not an easy game to watch.
And there's two
so
major
much
events on a Saturday night this week in Brisbane. There's the AFL and the NRL.
So, I mean, if you're the NRL, you're an idiot.
The scheduling.
Idiots. Because the AFL wouldn't be making this mistake.
Yeah.
They would not have this scheduling the same way they would.
Well, they don't have a New Zealand team.
Well, they've got a Perth team, they've got an Adelaide team, so there are time differences that they do cater for. You've got to cater for the time difference.
All right, so that's our best tips for the week of the major NRL semi-final games. It's going to be a cracking week. We've got Ryan over at Picklebet. He'll be on the ground covering it with the fans. That's going to be awesome to see. But let's look at the EPL, Nick.
EPL update this week. It was back this week. And as usual, Chelsea and Man United suck.
We stayed up for the Chelsea game, and I regretted it. You stay up to see some goals. It was the most boring game I watched all season so far. I think that's been the most boring game this season.
And it's boring because they've spent all this money on so much talent, and they just can't score. And it's not like, they're playing good brand of football. They suck. They can't play. They can't string more than 3-4 passes together.
I'm talking only like 12 months ago. They were a solid team that were putting goals away.
We'd probably say 24 at this point now. It's getting that bad.
18 months.
And Man United losing 3-1 to Brighton. You can't be having that. As a top 6 side, it's embarrassing. But as usual, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, they're performing to their expectations. They're winning the games that they should be. And in the Premier League, you've got to be winning these games. But the bigger thing is Tottenham winning. They won 2-1 in really surprising fashion, kicking 2 goals in injury time.
And you'll see it everywhere when Tottenham are winning because Aussies are on the Ange Postecoglou bandwagon. And rightly so. He's an Aussie coaching in the EPL. You get behind him. But is it too much?
That's my problem. I'm saying it's too much. I love a bit of fanfare and I love backing an Aussie.
But people will go at us for just supporting Premier League teams and not teams in your own backyard.
Exactly. So really, I'm asking the question, is the Aussie bandwagon mode of the Tottenham Hotspurs becoming too much? Is it becoming to a point where...
Fans are fickle. They'll be on the bandwagon this week. He loses a few games and they'll be calling for his sacking, for his
I
resignation.
don't mind the bandwagon. Look how good the bandwagon is for up the Waz. You got people that just watch rugby jumping on the Rugby League Warriors bandwagon and they welcome it. They're calling it the Waz bandwagon. Bandwagons should be welcome. If a team's successful and I want to start supporting a team in another code, I'm jumping on a bandwagon. So if that means I'm jumping on the Tottenham bandwagon because I want to support an Aussie coach, let it happen. If that means I watch Drive to Survive and I want to start supporting Red Bull in the F1, just let me do it. It's sport. Everyone enjoy it. Who cares?
Okay, I understand, but you got to be consistent with it then. During the down periods, you got to say by what you were saying at the earlier part of the season. I understand. I love supporting an Aussie, but Tottenham, if you're going to be saying, oh, I'm watching the Tottenham game, I'm watching this, shut up.
Nothing wrong with it.
There's something wrong with it because you're not a genuine fan.
Let's move on.
I'm not a genuine fan of most EPL games. I never grew up supporting the club. But to be fair, I don't think they like a lot of foreign fans coming to the games as well. A lot of the Man U, Man City teams are saying they're losing the culture of the club because at all these games, you're just seeing foreigners in the stands.
Okay, I'll say I'll allow Aussie fans supporting Postecoglou as long as they maintain that support further in the season.
I just want to make a shout out. WWE is set to announce tomorrow that they're going to have a WWE pay-per-view in Perth early 2024, so we'll definitely be there. Just earmark that one. Maybe we'll be covering it. Who knows? But that's set to be announced tomorrow. That'll be Wednesday this week. They're killing it with the international pay-per-views. They had one in the UK, Money in the Bank. They just went to India. They're becoming a global phenomenon. They just announced that deal with Endeavour Group, finally taken over.
I'm thinking of boycotting WWE because it's no longer run by the McMahon family.
Yeah.
I had an allegiance to the McMahon family. Now that it's not run by them, I might, boycott it.
And last thing to cover in the international realm, the Rugby World Cup's on, okay? And if you're supporting the Wallabies, not that I've been watching Stan Sport at all, I had to catch this up on the highlights. We were in Auckland getting caught up in the wires. But look, they lost to Fiji in a historic loss, 22-15, right? This is the first time they've lost to Fiji since 1954.
Jeez.
And it's the first time they've lost to Fiji in a World Cup, right? But why it's more embarrassing is the actual game itself. It was a shit game to watch. Only because I caught up on the highlights. And again, I'm not the biggest rugby fan, but I'll pay attention to the Wallabies. There were the first half was pretty much settled by penalty goals. Fiji kicked 3 or 4 penalty goals, and so was the Wallabies' reply. It was just a penalty goals. Get field position, play a power game, and kick penalty goals. There was 1 or 2 Fiji tries. Wallabies again got lucky with one of their tries as well, with Mark Nawanga-Nituazi doing a quick line out, capitalising on Fiji falling asleep. But other than that, very tough game to watch, and they just got outdone. The criticism for the Wallabies is they picked a young team, and Eddie Jones is owning it. He's saying, look, I picked the young team, and we're going to have to go through some pain, which I kind of agree with. You can't just keep picking the same Quade Coopers and whatnot, but they hooked their fly half.
Eddie Jones is starting to sound a bit like Phil Gould, all these long-term plans.
You know what, though?
Yeah.
He's earned it. He's had good tenures with the Wallabies, he's had good tenure with England, and now as well, he knows his talent isn't as good as
Look,
what it'll be in
I have
3
to
4 years'
agree.
time.
I mean, this is a long-term plan. Obviously, the next World Cup is in Australia, so
It's just
obviously
disappointing. Why it's disappointing is because a lot of people said the Wallabies would make it out of the group stage in flying colours. It's easy. They can't get past Fiji. Now they have to beat Wales just to even get past the group stages. So this game against Wales is massive.
I think they'll win, and I think they'll make it out of the group stage. The odds are against them now, but Wales aren't that good. Wales just scraped past Fiji in a very controversial win, and the Wallabies, I've jumped on the bandwagon as well. I'm an Eddie Jones
fan.
I'm
Okay,
an
that's
Eddie
what I
Jones
wanted
fan.
to ask. Is it okay for Eddie Jones to come out and say, in a World Cup, we're going to have to go through some pain by picking a younger team, and I have no regrets in doing it? Mind you, he hooked the young fly half off the field. early in the game.
I'm saying he can do whatever he wants because he's earned the right to do it. As a Wallabies fan, it's disappointing they lost to Fiji. Obviously, you want to win that game. And Fiji, you know what? You deserve to win. But Eddie Jones, under pressure, I think they'll win this game. And picking this young team will work out in the future.
He said that after the loss, it's going to motivate them to show up against Wales. He said something was a little bit off. But, I mean, at the end of the day, for people, I feel like the World Cup's on and not many people are caring in Australia. The international game of rugby is slowly dying because it's not as exciting as rugby league. It's a power game where people are kicking penalty goals. It's field position. It's force and backs. And let's just kick a three-pointer. And that's it. It's not the exciting...
Watching a game of chess.
Yeah, it's not the exciting 2000s rugby that everyone got around the Wallabies when they were playing that running style of rugby. It's a completely different game. And it's diminishing in Australia for that reason. A lot of youngsters in rugby are going over to rugby league where you can show off your skills. Is that fair to say?
There is talk that Ivan Cleary might sign before the next World Cup.
Nathan Cleary?
Nathan Cleary, sorry.
Yeah.
Nathan Cleary.
I hope he does.
They need something. They need a spark. Give
him $10 million and say, just play as long as you
Well,
want.
I'll tell you what, I'll be paying close attention to the Wallabies game against Wales this week. You know who else was paying attention? Israel Folau, who congratulated the Fiji Bullers on their win against the Wallabies, their first ever win since 1954. So congratulations to them. It's going to be an important game against Wales. We'll see what happens. But that is all we have for prime time this week. Make sure you're tuning in. We will have a grand final preview on next week. I'm looking forward to the game. We'll see if our bets get up. You're taking Brisbane 13 plus. I'm taking them 1-12.
I'm taking Warriors. I'm taking Panthers 1-12.
Mm-hmm.
So
and then ultimately we're going with the futures multi of Nathan Cleary, Clive Churchill, and Nick Dacos, Noam Smith. So keep an eye out for that. You get on them now while they're good value. But that's all we have time for prime time this week. Back to you in the studio.